I cleaned their floors for 15 years, then revealed I actually own the company and fired the CEO. No one saw it coming, not the executives who walked past me like I was invisible, not the managers who dumped their coffee cups on desks for me to clean. And certainly not Grant Ellison, the man who ran the company like a king, arrogant, untouchable, cruel. For 15 years I wore the same uniform, pushed the same gray cleaning cart, and emptied the same trash bins, while they laughed, held meetings, and made millions. I knew every corner of that building, every scratch on the marble floor, every smudge on the glass walls. But what they never bothered to ask, never even thought to imagine, was that I knew more than just how to clean. I knew who they really were. My name is Ruth Callahan. And while I spent my nights scrubbing their office toilets, I also listened. I watched. I remembered. I wrote everything down in a little black notebook I kept hidden behind the bleach bottles. In my janitor's closet, they thought I was just the help. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I was the widow of Frank Callahan, one of the earliest silent investors in Ellison Strategic Solutions. Before he passed away, Frank left everything to me, including shares, real, untouched shares that gave me ownership of part of the company. For years, I didn't even know what they were worth. I was too busy surviving, raising our son, figuring out how to live without the only man who ever truly saw me. Then, everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday evening. The building was quiet, most employees already gone. I was mopping the top floor near the executive boardroom when I heard voices, sharp, hushed, urgent. We'll move the money into the shadow account. No one checks internal vendor transfers, especially not compliance. It was Grant's voice. Cold, confident. I froze. My hands tightened around the mop handle. The other voice was nervous, shaky, but if someone audits, no one will audit. Fire 2 more departments and say it's restructuring. The board won't care as long as the numbers go up. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I knew what I was hearing, and I knew it was big. That night, I stayed up late, flipping through the dusty folder Frank had left me years ago. Inside were the old shared documents, a legal transfer signed in ink now faded with time. I brought them to Henry Park, Frank's old friend, a retired lawyer who still owed us more favors than he could count. Henry's hands trembled when he read the papers. Ruth, these aren't just shares. You're a primary stakeholder, one of the largest. I stared at him. What does that mean? It means you have power. It means you can vote, can challenge the board, and if you want to. If you really want to, you can fire Grant Ellison? That moment changed everything. I wasn't just a cleaner anymore. I was someone with a voice. And the more I listened at night, the more secrets I uncovered. Fraud, discrimination, layoffs that were covered up with lies, whispers of sexual harassment settlements, promises to investors that were never real. While they ignored me, I was building a case, quietly, carefully. I copied documents from recycling bins, snapped photos of spreadsheets left open on screens. Every night, I added to the notebook. Every day I walked into that building like nothing had changed, but I was no longer afraid because I had a plan, and on the day of the annual shareholder meeting I was going to show every single one of them who I really was. I arrived at the shareholder meeting in the same uniform I always wore, a blue shirt, faded gray pants, and the badge that still read custodial staff, Ruth C. No one even looked twice. Not when I entered the side door, not when I stood in the back, watching them gather around the polished mahogany table like it was their royal court. Grant Ellison stood at the head, of course, tall, smug, dressed in his usual tailored suit. He was talking numbers, always numbers. Revenue is up 12%, he said. We've trimmed the fat in operations and finance. The cost-saving measures are working. Our investors are happy. I watched as the board members nodded, sipping coffee, pretending they understood the complexity of what he was saying. I knew I'd seen the documents. The layoffs weren't cost-saving. They were cover for misappropriated funds. Millions funneled into shell accounts, bonuses paid from phantom profits, fake invoices to vendors that didn't exist. I took a step forward, then another. My heart was pounding, but my face didn't show it. I had been invisible for 15 years. That day, I used that invisibility one last time to reach the center of the room unnoticed. I cleared my throat. No one turned. I spoke louder. Excuse me, I believe I have the right to speak here. Now they looked, first confused, Then, annoyed, one of the junior board members gestured toward the exit. "Oh, this is a closed meeting." "Staff aren't allowed," Grant interrupted him, his eyes narrowing. "Ruth, what are you doing here?" I pulled the file from my bag, thick, labeled, detailed. "Exercising my rights," I said calmly. "As a shareholder, and as of last quarter's revised ownership registry, the third largest one in this room." Silence fell like a dropped hammer. I could see the blood drained from Grant's face. He knew what was in that folder, just didn't know how I got it, or how long I'd been watching. I laid the folder on the table and opened it. Over the last year, I've collected evidence of embezzlement, financial misreporting, illegal layoffs, and non-disclosed settlements, all under Grant Ellison's leadership. One of the board members leaned forward. "Hey, this has to go through legal." "It already has," I said. "Independent counsel reviewed it. So did federal regulators. We'll find copies of the filed complaints, along with the signed affidavit from your former CFO. She was forced out last March." "But she talked." Grant stepped forward, voice shaking. "You don't understand how this works." I looked him in the eye for the first time in 15 years. "I understand it perfectly. I cleaned up after your messes long enough to know how deep they go." Then I reached into the folder and pulled out the last document, the motion to call. A vote of no confidence, signed by the required shareholders, legally binding. I hereby call for the immediate removal of Grant Ellison as CEO. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. No one said a word. Grant opened his mouth, but no sound came. He looked around for allies. They looked away. The chairman slowly rose. "All those in favor?" Hands went up. "Not all, but enough." Grant was finished. He stormed out of the room, red-faced, defeated, and as the door slammed behind him, no one moved. No one spoke. Until I finally sat down in one of the executive chairs. Not as a cleaner, not as a guest, but as someone who belonged there. "I'll be reviewing all internal policies," I said. "We'll be rebuilding from the ground up. Fair wages, real diversity hiring, no more shadow budgets or offshore scams. And the people who lost their jobs under false pretenses, they'll be getting a call. It's back pay." Someone whispered, "Who are you?" I looked around the table and smiled. "I'm Ruth Callahan. You didn't see me before, but you'll remember me now." And I meant it. That evening I walked out of the building for the first time in 15 years with my head held high. No mop, no cart, no badge. Just freedom. And then I cleaned up their mess. Now, it was time to build something better from the inside out. 2 months passed like a storm. I was no longer a shadow sweeping floor. I was sitting behind the very desk Grant once claimed as his throne. The nameplate now read Ruth Callahan, interim CEO. Some applauded the change, others whispered. A few smiled to my face and sharpened knives behind closed doors, but I didn't come here to make friends. I came to clean house. Every department was under audit. I reopened employee grievances buried for years. People cried in my office not out of fear, but relief. For the first time, someone actually listened. I brought back those wrongfully terminated, gave them back their dignity, their pay, their place. But justice never comes without cost. One morning as I walked into the boardroom, my assistant stopped me, face pale. "There's been a leak," she said. I stared at her. "A leak?" She nodded. "Financial records, confidential ones. Someone published them online, along with an anonymous accusation. They're claiming you misused company funds, that your rise was a setup. God, that you forged those ownership documents." I felt my chest tighten. Not with fear, but with something worse. Memory. I took the elevator alone to the top floor, locked the door behind me, and pulled out a file I'd kept hidden for over a decade. The one with my real name, Rufina Morand, the records I hoped no one would ever connect to me again. Years ago, I was the daughter of a small business owner in Louisiana. My father trusted the wrong people, signed the wrong documents. We lost everything, the company. He died fighting a system rigged against honest people. I ran from my name, from my past, from the shame of being associated with a man they called a failure. That past was now clawing its way back. I hadn't forged the ownership records, but I had kept secrets about who I was, about how I came to own my shares. When the company first went public, I'd quietly bought stock every month, every year. When it dipped during scandals, I bought more. It was legal, but I never told anyone. Because I never wanted to be seen as the janitor who thought she could be boss now. Someone was using that silence against me. I called an emergency meeting. Everyone was there. Executives, legal board. The room was electric with suspicion. One said it out loud, but I felt the question hanging in the air. Is she just another fraud in a different uniform? I stood. I won't deny the truth, I began. I changed my name after my father's business collapsed. He was a good man, destroyed by powerful people who played dirty. I refused to be next, so I worked in silence. I invested with every cent I earned. And I rose not through shortcuts, but through patience. Let them see the weight I carried. The documents are real. The accusations are false. Someone inside this company is trying to destroy me because cleaning the floors was never the threat. Cleaning them out is murmurs, silence. Then the head of legal, a quiet woman named Priya, stood. The whistleblower used company systems to post the files, she said, encrypted login. Someone close. That night, I couldn't sleep, not because of fear, because I finally saw it. Someone I trusted was turning against me, and I had a guess who. His name was Marcus Vale. He'd been Grant's right-hand man, but I'd given him the benefit of the doubt. Kept him on, promoted him even. He smiled in meetings, agreed with every decision I made. But behind that polished charm, I now saw the same hunger that once lived in Grant's eyes. He wasn't just trying to discredit me. He wanted the company for himself. The next morning, I walked into his office unannounced, didn't look surprised. That told me everything. You leaked the documents, I said. He raised an eyebrow. That's quite the accusation, Ruth. You made it look anonymous. Clever, but not clever enough. You used your assistant's terminal. I traced the MAC address. He smirked, standing slowly. You think you can win just because you own a few shares? You're a janitor with a grudge. That's all you'll ever be. I stepped closer, fire in my voice. Maybe I was a janitor, but you forgot one thing. What's that? Snapped. I never needed a title to be powerful. Just the truth. I walked up before he could speak. By the afternoon, he was escorted out by security along with the full list of his communications, showing months of sabotage, blackmail attempts, and secret meetings with rival firms. But the damage was done. The media caught wind. My past. Betrayal. The accusation. Everything. I stood in front of cameras for the first time in my life. No script, no rehearsals. Just the truth. I started in this company as a cleaner, I said. I scrubbed the lies off floors long before I uncovered them in ledgers. Yes, I changed my name. But I never changed my values. And I didn't come here to be accepted. Came here to rebuild. And rebuild I did, but not without scars, because when you rise from the ground, every step upward comes with a price, and I was just beginning to pay mine. The storm didn't die after Marcus was removed. If anything, it grew darker. The headlines were relentless janitor turned CEO or corporate manipulator. Ruth Callahan's secret past unveiled from mop to power. Is it all a lie? I had never asked to be a symbol. But now I was one end. They wanted to tear it down. Every morning began with lawyers. Every evening ended with exhausted meetings. My staff, once energized, now moved like they were dodging landmines. A handful of board members started suggesting I step aside temporarily, just until the media fire cooled. I smiled and said no, but inside I felt the cracks forming. The pressure wasn't just professional, it became personal. One afternoon, as I left the office surrounded by security, I saw her, standing near the curb, now gray hair twisted in a low bun. Pale blue scarf knotted around her neck, a woman I hadn't seen in 15 years. My mother. She didn't wave, didn't speak. Just looked at me, those same eyes that used to plead with me not to leave after my father died. She had begged me to stay in Louisiana, to take care of her, to mourn like a daughter should. But I couldn't. I wasn't strong enough then. Had run, and I never went back. Now she was here. I didn't approach. Couldn't. I walked past like I didn't recognize her. But the moment the elevator doors closed behind me, I leaned against the wall and broke into 1,000 pieces. Fought the world. Fought lies, men, money, betrayal. But this, the weight of the mother I had abandoned, this was the war I had never won. Later that night, she left a letter at the front desk of my apartment building. It wasn't angry, just honest. I forgive you, she wrote. Forgive yourself. I read that line over and over until the ink blurred with tears. Forgive myself. I didn't even know who that version of me was anymore, and the universe didn't wait long before hitting me again the next week. An old investor returned, Malcolm Dreyer, a snake with a perfect smile. He had once backed the company when it was floundering and held enormous sway before the restructure. After Grant's fall, he lost millions. Now he was back, promising a chance to stabilize the company with his fresh round of funding. I refused. He laughed. You're too emotional to lead, Ruth. This isn't about vision. It's about control. I know, I said quietly. That's why you'll never have it again. But Dreyer didn't leave quietly. He began whispering into the ears of other investors, pushing for a vote to remove me. He rallied support from old board members who missed the good old days when profits came before people. Within days, a formal challenge to my leadership landed on my desk. I stared at it. For a long time, not out of fear, but out of fatigue. Was this what leadership really was? One endless battle after another? Still, I showed up to the boardroom that morning, all eyes on me. Malcolm sat at the far end, smug. The vote is simple, he said. We need someone stable, someone untouched by scandal. This company deserves calm waters. Stood, calm but fierce. You mean someone controllable? Someone you can puppet?
I didn't come here to be your pretty figurehead. I came here to protect the people who made this company what it is. He scoffed.
You think cleaning floors gives you moral authority? Please, no, I said. But watching from the bottom gives me something more valuable: clarity. I've seen what power does to men like you. I lived under it. I will never let it rule this place again.
Yes.
The vote began, hands raised. One. By one, some for me. Some against. It came down to the final vote. Priya, the same legal officer who had once helped uncover Marcus's betrayal. She hesitated. Then, with a deep breath, she raised her hand in my favor. The motion failed. I stayed. Malcolm stormed out, muttering something about lawsuits and lost legacies. I didn't watch him go, but I knew this wouldn't be the last challenge. Not from him. Dodd. Later that night, I returned to my apartment, pulled out my father's old journal, the one I kept hidden all these years, and read the last line he had written before the world broke him. If they try to bury you, remember they're just planting you. I closed my eyes and whispered, I remember, Papa. I wasn't buried anymore, but the fight had just begun. 2 months passed since I silenced Malcolm's power play, and on the surface everything looked steady. But peace in a company like this was always an illusion. Underneath, pressure pulsed like a buried fault line. One crisp morning I received a proposal from a major multinational tech conglomerate, Taltracor Industries. They wanted to acquire my company. The offer was astronomical, billions, enough to ensure security for generations. They promised full autonomy, promised to retain my employees, promised they'd carry my vision forward. I'd heard these promises before. Still, I couldn't ignore the practical math. The company had weathered storms, Marcus, Dreyer, public scrutiny, but it was still fragile. Funding was thinning. Trust needed time to rebuild. And I was tired. Taltracor sent over a team, polished, polite, smiling in expensive suits. They knew how to charm. They walked through our offices, shook hands, praised our culture. But behind their eyes I saw it. Hunger, not for people, not for mission, for control. They offered me a personal payout so large I had to reread it 3 times. With it, I could finally breathe. Pay off the medical debts I still carried from my sister's cancer treatment. Move my mother into a better home. Vanish from the headlines. Rest. And yet, I couldn't stop thinking of Miriam. She still cleaned the floors of our 3rd building, quietly, humbly, like I once had. Every Friday, she left a tiny flower on my desk, never said a word about it. It's just her way of reminding me where I came from. That woman didn't need a new boss. She needed someone who wouldn't forget her. That night, I sat alone in the office, watching the city lights blink like distant stars. My finger hovered over the email. 1 click. That's all it would take to accept the deal, end the fight, walk away. But then I thought of what this place used to feel like when I had nothing, when every floor I mopped reminded me I still had a chance to rebuild. I didn't just want to keep that hope alive for myself. I wanted to protect it for everyone who never got the offer I just had. I didn't click. Instead, I sent one line back. This company is not for sale. The next morning the fallout began. Some pulled out. The board held an emergency meeting. You turned down billions, Ruth, they shouted. Do you know what that could have meant for all of us? I do, I said quietly. But do you know what it would have meant for the people whose names you never learned? Silence. They didn't fire me, not because they agreed, but because they knew they couldn't replace me with someone who would still be standing after all I'd endured. And slowly, something beautiful happened. Employees, real people, started showing up to my office not to protest but to thank me, to say they understood, that they were ready to build this place together, not as a company but as a home, and we could all believe in. I reinstated programs for employee ownership, increased wages across departments, hired from the bottom up, and for the first time since I walked into this building with a mop and a dream, I finally felt like I belonged here not as a guest in someone else's empire, but as the architect of something that could last a year later. Profits returned, slowly, organically, with integrity. Not because we bowed to power, but because we stood against it. One afternoon, I walked into the break room and saw Miriam laughing with new hires. Her uniform was faded, her shoes worn, but her eyes sparkled. I tapped her shoulder. She turned. Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you, I whispered. For what? For never letting me forget. Shh. She smiled and offered me a paper flower, clumsy, wrinkled. Beautiful. I held it like it was made of gold, because it was not in dollars. In dignity.